The local Veteran Spotlight here on Channel 6 Central Kentucky Television is brought to you by ElderCare Financial Resources.
Hello, I'm Kenny Fogle. Spent 25 years in the Air Force. My dad spent a few years in the United States Marines during World War II, and we're both veterans. And why is that important? Well, it's important for one reason, because a few years ago, my dad passed away. Mom was living on her own for a few years and got to the point that she just couldn't do that anymore. So we had to look for some place for her to go, an assisted living, nursing home, something of that nature. So what we had to do is we looked around for some way to get this paid for. So we checked with ElderCare Financial Resources. And they put us in touch with the VA, as they were able to do a lot of the work with the VA, paperwork, things of that nature. They did every bit of it and did it for free. In-home services, if you're recuperating at home, or if you go to a nursing home or assisted living, you want to check with ElderCare Financial Resources, and they can set you up with a VA program that could help pay for some of this. They've been in business about 37 years, last 10 years with the VA, and they've been a godsend for us. So if you need help with that, need help with anything to do with Veterans Administration, as far as elder care, as far as staying at home, going to an assisted living or nursing home, again, give them a call. ElderCare Financial Resources. All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Channel 6 TV Community Focus. We're doing our series on veterans in Nelson County, and we got with us a gentleman today that, well, he's well known to us all. I mean, he's got several titles, been a state representative for several years, been a businessman here in Nelson County for several years, but today we're going to talk a little bit about a whole different aspect of his life, maybe a few years ago, and that's serving as a veteran and a member of the United States military, Mr. Jody Hayden. Jody, thank you for being here today, and appreciate you stopping by.
Well, I appreciate the invitation, and I want to thank you for your service to our country. I believe you were in the Air Force.
I had a few years.
How many years did you have?
Well, 25 altogether, counting National Guard and active duty. 5 active, 20 National Guard, so 25 altogether in uniform. But,
that's a little more than a few.
Well,
Thank you.
That's a few. But you know, sometimes there's a difference. I saw Vietnam. I was in Vietnam 12 times from the air. I never once set foot on the ground, because in my job, it was in the Air Force. We flew a lot, but I never landed in Vietnam. So there's a big difference seeing Vietnam from 30,000 feet up and Vietnam sitting with feet on the ground. So,
but you will agree, it's a beautiful country.
From what I saw, through the clouds and all that stuff.
The natural beauty is just phenomenal.
Yeah, well, and you know, and getting just way off the subject here right now, it's become a tourist attraction. I know I've talked to several people. My sister-in-law, as a matter of fact, they went over there a few years ago, and it's a place to go, great beaches, and become a big tourist attraction all over the world.
That's what I mean. I would love to go back. I returned with a group of my local National Guardsmen. My goodness, I can't remember what year it was.
It's probably my sister-in-law went with you, Rachel Platt.
Oh, Lord, yeah, I'm sorry, right. Forgive me. But that was interesting, and I'd love to go back again, and I can't convince my wife to go with me. It's different today because I feel more secure with health care. Yeah. You know, if you get sick or something over there, you've got care. But I'd love to do it before I pass on to wherever I go.
Well, another thing, the generational difference over there is the lifespan over in Vietnam is not quite at what it is in the United States. And a lot of the people that served in the Vietnam War over there are the elderly now. And the younger generation comes along. Most of them don't even remember much about what went on during that time, if you see interviews and things like that on TV. So it's a different set of people altogether.
Well, it's just a whole different thing for me today, and probably in the past 25, 30 years, I've given it a lot of thought, and more specifically, the past year or two, I've thought about Vietnam and why and how in the world did we ever get into such a fiasco? And I feel like we got into it innocently enough.
Yeah.
But why did it take, I forget how many years to get out of it?
Yeah.
My big complaint and my big, I think you heard me say on Memorial Day, that one of my greatest life regrets is that I didn't protest the Vietnam War when I got home.
That surprised me when I heard you say that, and it did. I have admiration for you saying that. But yeah, the day you said that, the Memorial Day service, I think a few people had had their mouth hung open a little bit there.
I didn't have the courage back then, And in recent years, I guess because of my age, I'm finding some renewed courage to speak out a little bit. The Vietnam War was basically like our Civil War in America years ago. It was the North Vietnam in that case against the South. In the North and South, but I think more so the North wanted to control the South.
Yeah.
Much like today's politics, we want to control people.
Yeah. Well, the word communism got in the middle of all that, and
Yeah.
that word coming from the McCarthy years and the years before that just scared people to death.
It scared us.
The
but it
word,
scared them.
the word itself is what scared everybody. And I know the domino effect. I read all this stuff. I mean, I was a little young for the Vietnam War. I didn't get in the military until right at the end, as it ended.
But that's what I mean when I say we got into it innocently enough. You know, the spread of communism. You know, every day at class we had to pray for the for peace.
There were bomb drills. I remember laying down on the floor and putting your head down because you never know when a nuke was going to come in or something.
But today, and I reflect back for a second, John Kerry. Every time I see him, you know, the past senator, John Kerry, I think in terms. It reminds me of. I wish I had done that because we served in 68 and 69, my unit.
Right.
And nearly half of the people who died in the Vietnam War, which was roughly 60,000 Americans, nearly half of those folks died after I was there. So had I come home and protested, maybe if we'd just gotten out of the war a few days sooner, we could have saved lives. I felt like people looked at me when I had those comments years ago as, oh, you're anti-government. Well, you know, that's okay in America.
And it's sort of what we're set up for.
And it's okay, and it's okay to protest peacefully. But today, you know, as I said, the past year or two, I'm reminded of Vietnam again because of the division I see in our country. You know, Vietnam or the Civil War, the North, South.
Right.
Today, I think it's more Republican, Democrat, resulting in bitterness and hate that I never envisioned would happen in our country. The North, Vietnam, used the people of the South, the citizenry of the South, to do their dirty work. And we call them the Viet Cong.
Viet Cong.
Well, they hired the Viet Cong, and one of the reasons they hired the Viet Cong was to save their soldiers. If somebody was going to die, let their people die. I mean, really, that was the outcome. And we learned at that time what terrorism really is, what a terrorist is. The Viet Cong were terrorists. They didn't have any big fancy guns like we have today. They didn't even have airplanes. They carried everything into the South pretty much by old trucks, a few old trucks, and I'm back. So their warfare was to wreak havoc by the darkness of night. It might be a young kid walking into a market and pulling the pin on a hand grenade. Much like today, we see in America people who are easily manipulated send bombs by the mail, or walk into the supermarket and kill people, or go into the church or the synagogue and kill people. Those are Americans. They're not communists. They're not. You know, they are Americans. We're killing one another. So it bothers me today that I'm reluctant to state that opinion that I just stated. Now, you've given me courage to do that, and I know that people will and can disagree with me, and that's fine. But I want to state what I firmly believe, that we're better than this.
Absolutely. Well, absolutely. That's one of the things I tell people. I served, like I said, 25 years in the military, and the reason I served is to give people the right to protest. I mean, I'm as much for liberty for protesters as I am for people that want to call themselves patriots, because we're Americans.
Well, remember the way we dealt with protesters back in the Vietnam thing, or back through the
Oh, yeah.
60s with the Democrat convention and all that stuff. The hippies, the long hairs we call them. But you know, as I think back, they might have been the smart ones. I mean, they didn't protest just because they didn't have anything else to do. They protested because they thought the war was wrong. And after my experience, that year of experience, I think they were right.
Yeah.
And everything you read today pretty much states the same thing. And I tend to read everything I can on that to try to learn something back. And really what I've learned is that then is not much different than today.
Well, even the church, you know, they say there's a difference between a war and a just war, and I know there's only been a few in the history that the church has considered just wars. I mean, Hitler obviously was a just war because we were in imminent danger. But there's other wars that have been very questionable.
Well, you know, I've made the statement to people that I don't believe in war. And I say that because today is so different. How do you fight terrorism? You know the way that we did it in Vietnam? If you thought there was one bad guy in the village, you burned the village down or shot them all. And that had to affect our soldiers. Now, let me explain up front.
Well, I understand.
I didn't do that, but I know
It was done. Oh, yes, it was done.
So my friends tell me, oh, you've got to create peace by more violence, more death, more guns, and we can't do that because we're not fighting a conventional war.
Yeah.
We fight, well, to go back on what's happened in Pittsburgh and Louisville and the mail bombs.
Yeah.
Who could have predicted that? That's what terror is.
Yeah.
So if we don't try our best to get some kind of control around that, rather than just, the remedy, we need guards, armed guards.
Yeah.
We do. I'm reluctant to say this because I don't care how many guns you have, or I like to see people hunt, but for the life of me, I can't understand why even our policemen need an assault rifle. Because they're so powerful. I mean, I'm amazed that more people weren't killed in the synagogue or in Las Vegas when that guy, because that one bullet, you know how big they are. It doesn't stop when it hits one person. It can go on and on and on.
Yeah.
So the policeman, let me explain that. And again, by way of military, when you pull that trigger, you have no really idea where the bullet's going to go. But one thing I learned in the military, or learned from that experience, is that how often that trigger pulled creates a friendly fire death. Hits an innocent person. Now, I know that's happened in the military a lot. I didn't see it happen. But I would really be interested to know, and I'll never know, how many people died in Vietnam as a result of friendly fire? How many people died in Iraq, Afghanistan as a result of friendly fire? Because if you have to pull that trigger real quick, you see the bad guy, but you don't see everybody else standing between you and him.
Yeah.
Now that's been my experience, as limited as it was as a soldier.
Well, is it safe to say that your experience in Vietnam changed you as a person?
Oh my gosh, you know, it's frightening almost in a way, because I find now that I'm semi-retired, I have time to reflect a little bit. And to go back to the Memorial Day thing, I am grieved by the fact that I didn't use my voice.
Yeah.
Because I tell my grandchildren, I think my daughter's wife got tired of listening to me, but to have a voice.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to.
Well,
to speak
my
up.
suspicion is that when you got home, you were just relieved to get home. You weren't really worried about at that time. I'm just not trying to put thoughts in your head, but at that time, you got to. It's survival. I mean,
It is, I suppose, and certainly relieved, but actually mad. I couldn't believe I mean, I just couldn't get my arms around any justification.
Yeah. Well, you lost friends there. You lost people you knew.
Well, no doubt about that. No doubt about that. And they were all innocent people. And actually, with that said, I've been uncomfortable talking about that experience
I
for
understand.
years because there's so many people that have lived with their loss. Now, the soldier who died is at peace, but the family he left behind, or she,
Yeah.
had to struggle for survival and had to struggle for an answer to why.
Yeah.
Why did we do that? And I was never comfortable trying to explain to them why I thought the war was wrong
Yeah.
and their husband or son died. But today, I look back on, and
Well, it's coming up on the 50th anniversary next year. So, I mean, it still seems to be fresh with you.
it's fresh because we continue to make those same mistakes. I love our government, but I've realized our government is made up of people just like you and I.
Yeah.
Iraq, Afghanistan. I mean, I guess it made us feel good. To use the analogy, you feel better when you kick the dog. Well, you know, when they did to us what they did in New York on 9/11, you know, it's sort of like going back to the village in Vietnam. Well, there's a couple of bad guys in there, so burn the whole thing down, destroy it.
Yeah.
My goodness, if we use that attitude today out here, if there's one bad guy on the street over, burn it all down.
Yeah.
And it's really that simple.
Yeah. Well, back
War.
then,
War.
and like I said, I was a little younger, but during the heyday of the Vietnam War, so I saw most of mine. Walter Cronkite brought it to me on the CBS
Oh,
News.
man.
15 minutes a day, and that's about it, and then on to something else. Being there is a different story. Now, today's environment, with the 24-hour news cycle, we'd be there all the time. So I would say there's a whole different environment today than there was when you got out. Protesting meant something different back then.
Well, I guess I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we have the guts or the knowledge to protest peacefully.
Yeah.
Now, I don't like anything about.
Yeah, I
We've
understand.
seen some protests regarding current events the past few years, and if there's no violence, I have a good feeling about that. That the government's not always right, and certainly I'm not always right. I'm probably wrong more often than I'm right. But I'm still right to my opinion. And my opinion in this particular incident, as far as seeing a war up close versus the person who didn't, I tend to think my opinion weighs just a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because it's so different when you can smell it and taste it. And
The local Veteran Spotlight here on Channel 6 Central Kentucky Television is brought to you by ElderCare Financial Resources.
Hello, I'm Kenny Fogle. Spent 25 years in the Air Force. My dad spent a few years in the United States Marines during World War II, and we're both veterans. And why is that important? Well, it's important for one reason, because a few years ago, my dad passed away. Mom was living on her own for a few years and got to the point that she just couldn't do that anymore. So we had to look for some place for her to go, an assisted living, nursing home, something of that nature. So what we had to do is we looked around for some way to get this paid for. So we checked with ElderCare Financial Resources. And they put us in touch with the VA, as they were able to do a lot of the work with the VA, paperwork, things of that nature. They did every bit of it and did it for free. In-home services, if you're recuperating at home, or if you go to a nursing home or assisted living, you want to check with ElderCare Financial Resources, and they can set you up with a VA program that could help pay for some of this. They've been in business about 37 years, last 10 years with the VA, and they've been a godsend for us. So if you need help with that, need help with anything to do with Veterans Administration, as far as elder care, as far as staying at home, going to an assisted living or nursing home, again, give them a call. ElderCare Financial Like I said, Resources.
be right in it.
Yeah, you saw things that have affected you every single day of the rest of your life.
True, but be careful. I don't like to talk about me, and you're saying what I didn't do anything. I just did what the government asked me to do. Didn't have any idea, but I did think at that time. I graduated from college one day, and my mother came to graduation and said, "You have to get back out to Bardstown." Mr. Simpson, she called him Mr. Simpson, it's Pat Simpson at the National Guard Armory, had one place, one opening left for you, and you got to go out today. And I said, well, Mother, I don't think, no, you have to go today. So I didn't argue, I went out and actually did. I don't know if I was sworn in, but I signed whatever. And went for my basic and advanced training a month later at the most. Got finished with Fort Campbell and Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and came home for roughly 6 months and got activated to go to Vietnam. So I really felt for Mother. That was so much. She did everything she could to keep me from going to Vietnam. But what she did got me
Well, tell me
a trip over.
Tell me the story when you had to go tell Mother that you was called to Vietnam.
Actually, I think she told me. I think, I know I heard about it. I was working then, so whoever was at home and listening to the radio, and of course that was before cell phones,
Yeah.
so nobody called me, but I do think I recall Jerry James, you know Jerry.
I do.
I think he came up to where I was working and said, did you hear the news? And I said, well, what? And he told me about being activated.
Oh.
But no, I'm pretty sure Mother had already heard listening to WBRT and all. And I guess I don't know if I was surprised or I don't know, I didn't have any idea, but I was thoughtful of the fact of what I saw on the 6 o'clock news. Man, that didn't look very good.
No. I remember when I got my draft number. It was a high number, and I was tickled to death. And then I go in and enlisted. I mean, that's the ironic part of it all.
But you wouldn't take anything for it.
No, I wouldn't. No, it's the best thing ever happened to me. Like I said, I've always told people the Air Force gave me a whole lot more than I gave the Air Force, and I was so thankful being a part of it. So no, so and I recommend that to everybody. I really do. I'm not everybody, but most people.
Well, most young people. But I believe that the result of my experience has really caused me to have a renewed interest for trust. Just because you're the boss or you're in charge of whatever doesn't make you right. And when you have to abuse facts to get what you want, and I think our government way back then did just that by everything I read. You know, even one thing that I tend to forget, that our government, some people in our government, and I can't remember the names, I've read so much stuff, but that, you know, nuclear warfare was considered in that by one faction. Can you imagine what would have happened? Where we would be today? And I believe that the weapons, the artillery pieces we were trained on, 109 guns like you see out in front of the armory, were designed to shoot to fire, that's military talk. Fire a
small nuclear warhead.
Yeah. That is frightening.
Well, and the frightening part is if you haven't studied history or you haven't been involved with it, you really don't realize what the word nuclear means, because it's the devastation of a nuclear, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, things of that nature is still being felt today. And
yes.
And I think people don't understand. You know, they go, nuke them. It sounds simple. But once you fire that nuclear weapon, you can't call it back, and it's done damage beyond repair.
Well, it's somewhat like I'm trying to say. When you deal with a terrorist, but just shoot him, those people, whoever was following him, is going to find a way. Well, fire one right back. So how do we get beyond that? How do we get to a point in life where we can be more rational? Now, most people are, thank God. Right.
Remember, mutually assured destruction was the actual name back then. So, well, Jody, I appreciate you coming in here today. Like I said, reliving some of the experiences that you may or may not want to relive, but it does. Like I said, the premise is you went in one person, you came out somebody totally different.
Well, if I could say thank you, and thank you for your service, and thank you to all the people out there listening and watching, and particularly the families of those veterans. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it. And thanks for taking the time out of your day. Again, a Veteran Series here with Jody Hayden. We appreciate him being here. Appreciate you being here listening in. Again, we're going to stick around. We've got a lot more of these coming over the weeks here on Channel 6 TV, and we appreciate you. And again, if you see a veteran today, give them thanks and Let them know how you feel about it. We'll be right back right after these messages here on Channel 6 TV.
The local Veteran Spotlight here on Channel 6 Central Kentucky Television is brought to you by ElderCare Financial Resources.
Hello, I'm Kenny Fogle. Spent 25 years in the Air Force. My dad spent a few years in the United States Marines during World War II, and we're both veterans. And why is that important? Well, it's important for one reason, because a few years ago, my dad passed away. Mom was living on her own for a few years, and it got to the point that she just couldn't do that anymore. So we had to look for some place for her to go, an assisted living, nursing home, something of that nature. So what we had to do is we looked around for some way to get this paid for, so we checked with ElderCare Financial Resources. And they put us in touch with the VA, as they were able to do a lot of the work with the VA, paperwork, things of that nature. They did every bit of it and did it for free. In-home services, if you're recuperating at home, or if you go to a nursing home or assisted living, you want to check with ElderCare Financial Resources, and they can set you up with a VA program that could help pay for some of this. They've been in business about 37 years, last 10 years with the VA, and they've been a godsend for us. So if you need help with that, need help with anything to do with Veterans Administration, as far as elder care, as far as staying at home, going to an assisted living or nursing home, again, give them a call. ElderCare Financial Resources.